And I wanted to tell you that I went to a meeting where there was this big-ass venture capitalist speaking, and apparently one of the most reliable indicators of whether or not somebody's startup is going to turn into a giant multi-million-dollar success is that they've dropped out of school.
Yes.
So you're in a good company.
The wrong thing is the blank thing.
Right. Well, I'm based in New York, and hopefully my slides will come up soon. Okay, so, all right. Most people, when they think of science, and this is my particular thing that I want to get on my horse about, because I'm a professional scientist. I've been in the game for like 30 years, and oh, my slides are not going. See, this is why I need the clicker, because I need that. Stop. Go back. Okay. All right. The drama was I'm going to say, this is what you think a scientist should be, and then I was going to say, but what about this guy? And that slide was, so just pretend that happened and everybody laughed. Okay. And I guess the point I try to make with this slide, by the way, they're both taken in biohacker spaces. And this could very easily be a professional scientist on the right, because in the life sciences, we don't generally even wear lab coats unless we're working with something that's particularly going to stain your clothing or something. So my point is that the idea of who should do science, what science is, I think is something that needs to be changed, because all of us can do science. I have a friend who's an artist, and the way that she talks about light, she knows about 100 times more physics than I do, and yet she thinks what I do is harder than what she does, and it's just not true. Just like anything else, it's an apprenticeship. I couldn't just decide to go in and be a pit crew for a Formula One race car just by reading a book. But given enough practice, maybe I could do it. So I think the thing that I wanted to do when I co-founded GenSpace was I wanted to bring science more into the hands-on realm of the average person. Because quite frankly, a trend that I was seeing all over the world was that people were not really understanding this new DNA-based technology, and it's moving with really blinding speed in terms of its capabilities and what it can do. And people were scared of it because they didn't understand it, and we were getting these very intense knee-jerk reactions against it, and a lot of propaganda from people saying that, you know, if you eat DNA, it's bad for you. I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff that was just not true. So now you can go to the next slide. So this is the lab that we ended up building in New York. It's called GenSpace, and you'll see a certain similarity to Cahal's lab in that there's a lot of stuff that may not look the way you might think a real lab looks like. But trust me, it's all completely functional. And that's another one of the myths, is that you have to have a lab that's built to some sort of architectural specifications and this and that. As long as you have areas that you can cordon off for specific purposes, you're fine. It satisfies all of the suggested safety protocols, and it satisfies all of the requirements that you need to do for a lot of really good experiments. So, go ahead. So this is how most of these labs evolve. They start out with a group of people that meet in somebody's living room. In this case, it was someone's kitchen, and as you can see, we put plastic down. We were very paranoid. We had a lot of press coming after us, even from the very beginning, sort of trying to see us doing something dangerous. So we did that. We would meet maybe once a week. But after a while, you want to do something that's a little more continuous. You maybe want to work on a project, and you can't put bacteria in somebody's refrigerator at home. So instead of dumping everything into a bucket of bleach at the end of every day, we moved into a hacker space. And we took over a corner of a hack space called New York Resistor. And again, we were there for a while, and we ran, this is a workshop on extracting DNA that we ran. But again, it wasn't very satisfying because we didn't want to keep large quantities of stuff in their space, and also we needed to carve out an area that we could sort of cordon off. And so we ended up finally getting a space in a building that's very interesting because it's a lot of different businesses in the same building, very creative businesses, a lot of designers and artists and writers and beekeepers and green technology people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes for a lot of interesting collaborations. So why do we have this space? Well, I always say there's 3 things, or 4 things. Biotech needs fresh blood. This is the way biotech started. It started with scientists doing things in their garages. It started with people taking it over home. And I think that's one of the dirty little secrets, is that there's probably no professional scientist that hasn't taken something home at some point. Trust me. And a lot of the big companies you see today started in people's garages. So I'm kind of seeing that cycle, and then they were bought up by larger companies, yada, yada, yada. It's a great teaching space. There's a lot of people that want to go into this field. They're interested in it, but they have no place to go because funding is so tight. People that actually have labs and might have space for them to do training in can't afford to take on more than 1 person, and they have to work on whatever their grant, as Cathal was saying. Once you take a grant, you have to work on what the grant was for. So you can't let someone go off onto an interesting exploration, especially when the funding is tight. So here, people can come in and get mentored and work on all sorts of stuff. So we really feel that we're supporting the next generation of scientists, and hopefully making them responsible too, because there's an awful lot of discussion that goes on in these community spaces, and that'll probably go on tonight about the social and the moral and the ethical questions that this technology, not these amateur labs, but this technology in general is opening up because it's so powerful. And then there's community outreach, which sort of goes hand in hand with that. And art-science collaborations, I'm sure Mark will give you a huge earful on that. No? But he's done a lot of them, and GenSpace, just because it happens to be in New York, which is the art capital of the United States, we have a lot of artists coming in and doing stuff. And the only restriction, this is really important for us, people said when we started, are you going to force people to work on stuff that, are you going to say that if you want to eventually patent something, you can't? Sorry. We said, look, we're not going to ask them if they're going to patent it or not. Whatever they want to work on, in whatever manner they want to work on it, or whatever manner they think they want to work on it, we're not going to interfere with that. We're going to say, go ahead, just don't annoy your fellow members and make sure you're safe. And that's all we care about. And I think it's really important to have a space to be able to do that in. We don't care if it's new to the world or if it's only new to you. We don't care if it's going to make money or not make money. We don't care if you want to patent it or give it away. And we don't care if it's going to work even. So anyway, go ahead. So you can whip through these pretty fast. So we do kind of the same thing that a lot of these spaces do. This is nothing special to GenSpace. We have classes, keep going, workshops, educational stuff. Stop here, go back to that. Go back. Yeah, this is interesting because we've been asked to join Maker Faire Africa twice. So we were in Cairo like right before the 2nd round of violence, which was really interesting. We almost didn't get out. So we were working with students at American University, and that's Lagos, Nigeria this year. And this is an equally alien place, which was a really meeting full of rich people. It's a lot like TED. It's called DLD in Berlin, in Munich. So that was yet another foreign culture that we interacted with. We had a lot of people that came up to us and thought we were doing fee-for-service work, and we're like, no, you're supposed to test your own DNA. We don't want you to spit in the tube and hand it to us and expect us to give you the answer. And that was one of our iGEM teams, which I don't know if Mark's going to, if you're going to come over. Okay, go ahead. So, what can you do in this lab? Why do you want to even join one of these labs? Well, we're all really happy about the horse meat scandal because that is the perfect thing to do in these labs. This was a couple of high school kids in New York who did a technique called DNA barcoding, which is really easy and you can do with one of those PCR machines that Cathal made out of a coffee can. And what it does is it identifies what's in the sample, what kind of organism it is. There's a database of sequences, and you can identify what type of fish is your sushi. And what they found that something like 30% of the fish that was sold in these restaurants was not what it was labeled, particularly things like white tuna that they were charging this premium price, and it turned out to be tilapia, which is really cheap. So then they went on to test goat cheese that had cow's milk in it, and a lot of other things that you don't want to know about. But we definitely, and some of the other labs here, are all about testing for that horse meat, because it's really easy, and it's a way to demonstrate how this technology is practical in a lot of ways. This was me testing a ladybug, what looked like a ladybug in my backyard, because I wanted to know if it was a ladybug or hi, Edward. If it was an invasive species, and it turned out it was. So I was sort of interested in that. So now I kill them with reckless abandon. Next. This was very interesting. This is a guy named Sascha Karberg, who's in Germany, and he did an exercise where he and a friend tricked out this van with a lab, and there was someone on their street whose dog was pooping and not cleaning it up. So they did a whole DIY forensics. They collected the sample, and then they threw tennis balls to all the neighborhood dogs. And they got the DNA off the saliva, and they actually managed to identify the culprit and confront the owner. So that was very satisfying, this technology. It was wild. They have a video of this, and they have them like leaning out the window of the van with like telephoto lenses taking pictures of the dogs. Anyway, this is an artist who works in our space, and she has this product called Stranger Visions. And what she does is she was hanging out in this place, and she saw a hair caught in the frame of a painting, and she started wondering, oh, I wonder whose that hair is, yada, yada, yada. And she realized that with this new technology, she might be able to tell something about the person. And it turns out that they're getting more and more information about what markers say what your eye color is. Even some of the latest stuff has to do with facial shape. And you can do ethnicity from the mitochondrial DNA. So what she does is she collects hair in public places. She does analysis on it, and then she makes a portrait on the computer and has a 3D printer print it. And it's very creepy. But I like it because it really brings home how far this stuff is starting to come. Now, it's not that accurate yet, but it's starting to be more and more and more accurate at a number of things. And certainly for some medical things, it is accurate. Because as she said, I can know more about this man than his doctor does. I can know what his percentage, his potential for something like diabetes or heart disease is based on his DNA. So it's very interesting, you know, it brings up all of these issues about privacy, about, you know, whether or not you own your information and stuff like that. Go ahead. This is just self-identified DIY labs all over the world. And if you could just flip, this is a bunch of slides of various people. You recognize this gentleman. So you can see there's a number of people all over the world doing this. And I for some reason, I had a couple of other slides and they dropped out. So I'm sorry, Newcastle, you were in here and I don't know what happened to you. And the House of Natural Fibers was in here too, and I don't know what happened to them. But these are just examples of things that are happening all over the world. And I think my 10 minutes is probably up. But just what I want to leave you with is that I think this technology is too important to be left just in the hands of companies and academics and not in the hands of the general public. I want the public to understand it. I think the best way is to actually do it. I mean, you don't have to go whole hog and be a molecular biologist, but just as everyone now has a sort of working knowledge of electricity, I would like people to have a working knowledge of this technology. I think it's important. Thanks.